What's happening, everyone? Welcome to Al Chile Boxing Talk. I'm here with my compañeros, No Paul Boxellanos and Run PMC, and we got our special guest, Sean Gringo Hicks from Long Live Boxing. Thank you so much for joining us, bro.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's an honor to be here and look forward to getting to the boxing talk. I mean, there's a lot going on in and outside the ring. So what better than to talk to Chile, the guys that bring it every time. So appreciate it.
Dude, and we appreciate it too, bro. Well, hey, man, let's get into the weekend recap, dude. Xander Zayas, I think we all agree he's going to be the prospect of the year. He just put a spanking on Dan Carpinci, and I know that you guys have had him on a couple times. I had the
Yeah.
good fortune of talking to Xander on D-Style Show. Very nice, humble young man, but he brings the goods and he brings pain, man. So, tell me what you think about him so far. You've been watching him for quite a while. What were your thoughts
Yeah.
about how he did and how it looks like how it's going?
Well, absolutely. Very, very proud and appreciative to his performance. Actually, we reached out to his coach, Coach Centeno. It was his birthday yesterday. Shout out to Coach Centeno. How he had. I really like and appreciate the game plan. I mean, sometimes you're going to come in there and you're going to have those tougher fights as he's moving up. His last fight when he fought under the Oscar Valdez undercard, I thought that a lot of people were a little critical of it because the amount of hits that he took, and amount of punishment, but he dished out punishment as well. And there's nothing wrong with a fighter looking vulnerable. I mean, that's the fight game. The more you move up, the more competition, the more challenging fights you're going to have. You're not going to always look phenomenal. You're not going to always blow the opponent out the water. So a lot of people were already kind of casting him aside, like, oh, well, here we go again. This guy's overhyped, and which I have an issue with that. But overall, as far as how he looked this past weekend, very impressive, dominant. I love the levels that he brought, as far as, and he had a lot of feints in the beginning. So he looked really good. And then another thing, he took a tough guy. Granted, he had a layoff, but he took out a tough guy that hadn't been knocked out before. And then he did it with cumulative punches and a game plan that he executed. And then another thing that I most appreciate about Xander Zayas is that he listens to his corner. Nothing like a teachable student. So props to him, and I can't wait to see what's next. I mean, prospect of the year, I think, is a pretty much a done deal. And the beautiful thing for everyone is we're going to see him again in December 11th in Madison Square Garden. So I know he's excited, and hopefully we get a chance to be there.
Yeah, I agree. I was thoroughly impressed with the performance by Xander, and the main thing I think I appreciate from Xander is that you see the constant improvement from fight to fight, but also outside of the ring. I mean, it's all pertaining to his boxing career, but his nutrition is on point, his sleep's on point, strength conditioning. He has the support system of his family and his coaching staff. So I really appreciate that at such a young age he has the maturity to put put his career number one and not have distractions at this point. He put everything forward. But for his performance, I thought he was I thought he was pretty spectacular. I mean, the punch variation, the combinations that he was running combinations of the body, bringing them up top, and I also liked his patience in spots. But then when he did sense that he had it, he wasn't afraid to go for it. And I agree also that I think a lot of people are overcritical of his last fight because it's he's getting a lot of publicity in the sense compared to fighters of the past, but he's not. It's not like he's pay-per-view already, or he's not like he's the main event at least of these big cards. So he's really just bringing him up. Top Rank thinks highly of him, which they should, and he worked hard for it, and he's going to continue to work hard, I think. And I'm looking forward to seeing him in December and seeing what he has to bring, because up until this point I've just seen constant progression, and he's a focused guy, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yep.
Excellent, man.
Great.
What do you think, No Paul?
Man, I think you guys all made some awesome points. My personal thing with Xander is I love how down to earth he is. He's a humble dude. He doesn't try to go out there and look cool. You know what I mean? He's himself, and I actually appreciate when you see a young fighter like that. Sometimes you see him Gringo said, his last fight he looked a little vulnerable, and I appreciate that at such a young age he's taking these challenges, that he can't necessarily just go in there and knock these dudes out, but it's going to show a slow progression. And even if you go back to guys like Canelo, you see that they had fights just like that where they could have gotten, they were in a bit of trouble, and that's what helps them come up, as opposed to just taking these easy ass touches. And I think the big thing that's going to help with him is his activity level, and like I said, I mean, I think, I said it on a different show. Other people thought that was funny, but I think he's probably going to be like the next Miguel Cotto of Puerto Rico, and I'm hoping the best for him, and continue working at it.
Oh yeah, man. I'd like to acknowledge what rep it, my homie. If you guys like Al Chile, then you'll like what rep it. He tells it like it is, and he's also got a nice conspiracy vein that I like, very open-minded. He's pro-Latino, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with the Latino rooting for the Latino. You know what I mean? And he had a really good he was going on a rant yesterday about how, for some reason we're just not allowed to root for Munguia for no damn reason, even though the guy's a champion and undefeated. So he makes a lot of good points. So I encourage everybody to take a look at him. And man, as far as Xander Zayas, you guys hit all the notes. Like the only thing I'd like to add to that is that yes, I totally enjoy how fan friendly he is and how humble he is. And he's got a lot of maturity. When I hear him speak for being so young, he's only 19, and man, he seems to have a plan, but he also seems to have patience. And he's still growing. Like he looks great at 154. Looks super fast at 154. And I could be wrong. He's listed at 5'10", but I think he's still growing. Like I think he's taller than 5'10" based on when I've seen him like line up with other people and I roughly know their height. I'm like, man, this kid looks like a little taller than 5'10" to me. But I don't know about that for sure. But I can say that I'm happy for him. It looks like he's really ready to embrace his fans. Like the Puerto Rican people, they're ready to anoint someone, as the next big thing for Puerto Rican boxing. But I think everybody can like Xander Zayas. He's extremely likable, and he has the goods, so he has everything going for him. So I'm really excited to see what he does moving forward. I say, increase his level of competition. Like I think that he's ready for 8 rounders, 10 rounders, and a higher level of competition to see where he's really at with things.
Absolutely. Another thing I just want to chime in real quick as far as Xander, that obviously, I appreciate his his willingness to be interacting with the fans. He's very, fan friendly, the people's champ. And, one thing that, I'm not Puerto Rican or anything, but I have noticed that I take exception to is like, I get it. There's like a anti, hype job kind of thing. Xander's not a hype job. Like, so when people compare him to Berlanga, I mean, I take offense to it. Like it's not the same thing. There's like a 6-year age difference. Xander has skills. He listens to his coach. He's more active. I mean, just go on down the line. He's a future champion. No disrespect to Berlanga, there's some potential there, but it's like night and day to me. So I think when sometimes people lump fighters that are young for whatever reason, maybe their ethnicity or their culture for what nation they represent, it's a discredit to those fighters. It's not even the same thing to me. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Yep, I agree. I think Berlanga is closer to Rolando Romero and in comparison, and then Xander's more closer to Teofimo Lopez if you look at their probably career trajectory.
Oh, totally. I mean, Xander's still so young. By 23,
Yes.
I mean, I'm like you said, Gringo. I don't think he's a hype job. I think he'll be a world champion by 23, easy.
Awesome. So yeah, I can't wait. And December 11th, man, it's gonna be another show, man. So awesome.
That's right, man. Well, let's get to the main event of the ESPN card. I'm sure we all saw it. Shakur Stevenson versus Jamel Herring. Like, there's been a lot of coverage already. Everybody agrees it was a one-sided beatdown. There's a lot of stuff to like about what Shakur Stevenson could do. He's a very talented young man. Run PMC, like, what'd you think about the fight in particular? And then after this, we'll get into what he has for the future. But tell me what you thought about the fight and his skills.
I mean, I was impressed. Like I said in the last episode, I've been following Shakur. I didn't actually get to see the final bout where he was robbed in the Olympics, supposedly robbed in the Olympics, but I've been following him since he signed with Top Rank. And another one, I've seen like constant progression. Obviously there are peaks and sort of just plateaus for him, but I was thoroughly impressed. I think he bossed Herring around the ring. I was expecting a little more from Herring, but at the same time I wasn't, because I think I'm a fan of Herring. I love how he served the country, and I love his story. And he's a very hard worker, and how he reinvented himself with Bo Mack and the team out there. But I always thought, even before the fight, I can't get the Shafikov fight out of my head, where Herring just got beat down. And Shafikov isn't necessarily a big guy. He was definitely strong, but he wasn't necessarily big. And then he came back and then got outboxed by Memphis Miller. So then obviously both those are lefties. I'm like, but they have inferior skills when compared to Shakur Stevenson. But I was impressed by Shakur. He outboxed him, he bullied him on the inside, and he pushed him back. And then obviously Herring showed some heart, but at spots. But I think the right call was made with the stoppage, possibly a little bit early. But then again, it's like, like for my scorecard, I only gave Herring the 5th round, and I still marked that as a close round. And everything else was just Shakur 10-9s. and then finished him off in the 10th. So I could see the stoppage. Herring's a little bit older, but at the same time, I'm looking forward to see what Shakur brings coming up, because he has a lot of options, whether he wants to stay at 130 or even move up to 135. Like I've said before, I mean, we'll touch on it more, but you don't need to come in at the limit. He could come in at 132, 133 if he fights at 135 and give a lot of people problems, I think.
Yeah, no, Paul, what do you think, man? What are your thoughts on Shakur Stevenson beating down Jamel Herring and knocking him out?
You know, I wasn't surprised. I really like Jamal Herring, but you know, Shakur Stevens is just an awesome talent, man. I think, you know, people have been asking me if I think he's like the next Floyd. The only thing that separates him from Floyd is basically the footwork, you know. I think Floyd had way faster feet than Shakur, but man, Shakur really did a great ass job. I actually, man, I found myself in the situation where I'm like trying to give Jamel Herring some rounds, you know, just because. But I mean, I can't give him a round just because he lands a jab here and there. You know what I mean? You know that feeling where you're like, man, I got to give him some kind of round, but you know, it's just basically, I basically, you know, thought that, you know, that Shakur won most of the rounds. You know, I didn't even really score it, but you know, he's got a great future ahead of him, and hopefully he can, you know, land a big fight with, you know, with anybody basically.
Yeah, man. Well, you know, I agree with all you. Like to me, like, and I'm not trying to criticize Shakur Stevenson because you know we've seen everything that's great about him. So like when I discuss Shakur moving forward, it's more about the fact that I think that we all agree that he has the potential to have a very high ceiling. It's almost like, well, how far can he get? You know, like, and we're going to discuss potential matchups here coming up. But I mean, you know, he can just kind of pass through 130 if he wanted to, right? He could even maybe even pass through 135. Like to me, I feel like he's growing into his strength. You know, I do have concerns about his potential lack of power, but I don't know that for sure. I mean, you know, Jamel Herring, I thought he was a solid champion. Like I wouldn't classify him as great, but I did think he was good. And you know, speed kills. And I also think that, you know, we need to see how Shakur reacts when he gets hit really hard on the chin. So we still got to see that as well. But I only want to look for those things because, you know, every time I see Shakur go out there and dominate, it just reinforces what I know is already very good about him. I'm very impressed with Shakur Stevenson. Oh man, and his hand speed, and it's just super impressive. And the way he can throw combinations, you know, I think combinations is slowly becoming like a lost art in boxing. And Shakur really knows how to place punches. I know that he had the ability to kind of know how to hit Herring, I mean, probably because they spent a lot of time sparring each other. They know each other so well, right? So, but I mean, outside of that, like he had everything down by the first round of like how this fight was going to go. And I didn't necessarily think the fight was over, but you know, as soon as Herring went back to the corner, and Bomac was like, "Hey, man, you need to start pushing forward." Like I knew there was a very little chance that anything was going to change. The dynamic didn't change, you know, and this also shows us that you can have one hell of a corner, but you know, it's really about the talent that's in the ring sometimes. Terrence Crawford's corner, just, you know, I'm sure they had a great game plan. I'm sure Herring was sufficiently prepared, but it just wasn't enough to stop the young, up and coming, hot new champion. I mean, it is what it is. This is a story that we see in boxing, and you know, it's part of the lure of boxing. So it was interesting to see that, you know. And then one of the things that I also wanted to touch on was like the mental game before the fight. You know, this whole like we're not friends. Then he beats Herring's ass, and then they become friends. I thought that was you know, I ended up liking it, you know, because I understood it. I've seen it before, and you know, I also appreciate when two boxers can be statesmen and there's no bad blood. You know, also in UFC, I see that too. I'm always impressed when I see two UFC guys being super friendly with each other. And then all of a sudden they go and try to like literally knock out the other one, maybe even choke the guy out. And it's all good afterwards too. But, you know, that can happen in boxing. Like there's nothing wrong with two people being statesmen and then going in and doing battle. But if there's a mental game ahead of time, I'm also okay with that. Like there's nothing wrong with having two camps start beefing towards each other, not liking your opponent, because it is war. And, you know, we've seen this before. Teofimo does the same thing. He tries to get in his opponent's head, or, you know, at least stop showing as much respect as he maybe could. Like they want to have like an edge to them. Josh Taylor does the same thing. he'll talk mess to his opponent, talk down to his opponent, and then afterwards, he'll be really kind, saying like, "Hey, man, I'm sorry, I'm just a competitor. Like, it's all good, it's all good." You saw that with Regis Prograis, even though they're starting to beef again on Twitter, but they all tried to make good afterwards. So Josh Taylor did that with Ramirez as well. So I understand that dynamic, and I'm not here to judge Shakur Stevenson. Could a heel run work for Shakur Stevenson? Like, I think it possibly could. Like, I think that he's one of those people where you could kind of see what you want to see in him. Like, to me, I think he's a respectful young man. I think he's also a student of the game, and he's got the goods, and he's confident too. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I'm really excited to see like where he will go. So yeah, man, like we could get right into it, man. Like, I'd really love to discuss like what you all think about him potentially fighting Valdez next. And if that fight doesn't happen, what could happen next? Because, everybody's been talking and demanding this fight, and it's only Tuesday. So, no, Paul, I want to start with you, my friend. And I want to start with you because you were one of the few people besides G-Funky who picked Valdez to beat Burchelt, man. So I want to know, dude, are you ready to circle the wagons? And what do you think about Shakur versus Valdez? Does Valdez have a chance? And if that fight doesn't happen, what would you like to see?
Oh, man, why you got to start with me, man? You're
because, man, let's see what happens, bro. Yeah, dude, for sure, bro.
Okay, man, I'm going to keep it 100 on this one. I think that Valdez should fight, what's his name, instead of Shakur, bro. He should fight, yeah, I'm going to keep it real because I think he has a better chance with, what's his name? I'm forgetting his name. Navarrete. Yeah, I think he should fight Navarrete because he has a better chance. And if he's gonna have any kind of chance against Shakur, he might as well get that payday first, and then not jump straight into it, brother, because I think that would increase his chances, and also it would business wise, it's better to get those two paydays out of the way. You know what I mean? So that's what I think, without saying too much,
Damn. So Valdez should duck. Okay, man, we got you on record. That's all right.
No, I'm not saying he should duck. I'm just saying he's better off getting Navarrete out of the way first, and then, fighting Shakur.
Hey, you know what, man? I gotta tell you, I agree with that too. Actually, I'm just trying to keep it real. I just happen to think that Shakur is just too good for Valdez, and the way Shakur made Herring look one-dimensional, I think he could do the same thing to Valdez in a lot of ways. Like, I think the Conceição fight showed us what Valdez is vulnerable to. I think that Valdez doesn't have a high enough activity rate. I think he's a little too small for Stevenson. I think Shakur Stevenson knows how to be a bigger guy. I think he knows how to utilize his strength. He knows how to fight from the distance. He knows how to fight mid-range and on the inside. I feel like he would reduce Valdez to possibly just like a mid-range hooker. And he kind of is sometimes anyways when he's being outboxed. That's just my opinion, but like also the one thing I noticed about Valdez is during the Conceição fight is every time the inside fighting would start and Conceição just decided to tie up, Valdez would just act so helpless. He would just kind of stick his hands out and just wait for the ref to like break them up. Like he doesn't have any of that inside grit. Like, I want to keep fighting. Like, he'll take advantages of the breaks. And if he allows Shakur to dictate when they're going to fight on the inside, when they're going to clinch, he might find himself realizing that Shakur is very intelligent on the inside as well and could take advantages of what Valdez thinks is going on as opposed to what Shakur plans to do. I think it's a bad stylistic matchup. On the other hand, I do think the Navarrete versus Valdez fight would be a great stylistic matchup. That one would be fun to watch, fan-friendly. I understand that Valdez hasn't really said anything. He's got a Twitter account. He hasn't said anything so far, so it's like, I find that very curious. He could have easily come out and said, "Hey man, let's get it on." I think that there is possibly some plans to that, so we'll see. What do you think, Gringo?
Wow. Yeah, a lot of unpack there, but yeah, definitely Shakur was, phenomenal. And I think that even though it does line up because they're both under the same banner, they're both under top rank, that is Oscar Valdez, versus Shakur Stevenson, the WBO, and they had that back and forth, and then politics step in. I do kind of have a feeling that politics will step in again, not a straight duck, but actually on a previous card, I thought they were setting things up for Shakur to have another potential opponent just in case of something to kind of play out of the fight that, between Herring and Stevenson, that a lot of people didn't get a big a lot of attention to it. But on the undercard they had for Wilder, well, Fury, Wilder 3, they had Robeisy Ramirez. He fought again. And I could see that whole vengeance thing again from the Olympics, bring it up for Shakur. I could see him being a possibly, and he looked great against Capu Gonzalez that, we got a lot of respect for. We've had on the show as far as a potential opponent. So I can kind of see it's weird. Like I can kind of see the roadmap coming together as far as what you're saying. I could see Oscar Valdez, Navarrete, which also another thing too, as crazy as it sounds, imagine the hype, the excitement, and the respect from either fighter coming out of that fight. I mean, look at the respect that Joet Gonzalez is getting, and he lost. I mean, hell, he damn near lost an eye. So it could actually be a win-win. And how are you going to be called a duck when you take another tough opponent? You know what I mean? So I think there's some substance to that theory, possibility. So what I'm thinking is going to happen, sorry for the long-winded response, is I think that Shakur Stevenson is going to fight Robeisy Ramirez. They're not going to fight Oscar Valdez off the bat. And I think that Oscar Valdez is going to wind up fighting Navarrete sometime in the beginning of next year.
That's a good plan. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to that, just as long as I want them. I know it's hard with the business of boxing, but I want them to make this stuff like more of the promoters, their plans known. Like if the promoter Top Rank came out and said, "This is our plan, and we want the winners to fight each other," I would be totally down for that because it would be more interesting. It's like I said before, it'd be like sort of a semifinals, and then the finals, those guys might fight each other. So I would.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm sorry, Run PMC, you're the man. I was just gonna say, and going to that again, they're all under every guy that I mentioned, they're all under Top Rank. So
Yes.
I wish they'd be more transparent with it, but we have to be here trying to, on the outside looking in, like, hey, you know what, that does make sense, and I think that's where we're at.
Yeah, most definitely. But if they just from, I don't know, I'm not a promoter, but from a fan's perspective, if you were to make those fights make them known to the public, that just gathers their attention. Like people don't really care about leading up to the Super Bowl. They care about the playoff games, but everyone watches the Super Bowl. So just as long as you just have to build the momentum for the promotion. But for my personal opinion, I'd want to see the big fights now. But if they could build them up, good for them, and it does give us more quality fights with people that aren't in quote unquote compromised situations in their career where they might have be coming off losses. But I would love to see Shakur versus Valdez next. But if they don't, then I would like them to follow the plan you laid out where they have those two fights and then the winners possibly fight each other, because that would just gain more momentum for them and it would be good fights. But with regards to Valdez, I don't think I mean for the record, I did pick Valdez by knockout over Burchelt, and I also called left hook. And
Shit!
That's what happened. We can check the G Funkies chats on the old episodes. You can check it, but I don't think that I have to study some film, but I think Valdez should stay away from Shakur just based on the style, because what I think about is since Valdez went over to Eddie Reynoso, he's had good performances and subpar performances, but the ones that stand out in my mind are Adam Lopez, who is a solid fighter, but no way is he, I think, a world-class fighter. But then he dropped Valdez, and then that fight was pretty close until I think that was stopped early. In my opinion, it was stopped late in the fight, but I think Adam Lopez should have had more of a chance to fight back. And then I also think of Jason Velez, nothing really was happening in that fight, but he was sort of giving Valdez trouble. But then, like the great Dwyer says, knockouts cause amnesia. Burchelt gets knocked out by Valdez, and then we sort of forget about that. But then we're sort of reminded by the Conceição fight of maybe the limitations Valdez has in his skill set. So it's but that's the interesting thing with boxing, like styles make fights, and that's why we have the fights, is because we really don't know. We could speculate all we want and go off of past performances, but we don't know till the two guys are in the ring. So that's why we need the fights.
Yeah, and Ron, you made a good point about kind of maybe cooking this fight a little bit as far as what Top Rank could choose to do. If memory serves, I remember back in the day before the Cotto Margarito fight, Arum had both of them on the same card. I think it was like Margarito versus Cintron. I forgot who Cotto fought, but that really hyped up the fight, and in my mind back then, I think boxing was just more popular in general back then. And then that pay-per-view ended up doing, I think 500,000, which was pretty damn decent, so if you put it in that perspective, like these guys aren't that big of stars yet at all, really. You know, if you put them on the same card, I mean, you could really build something up, because if you put them together right now, I think it would be a good fight. But I don't think it'd be a fight where, like, you know, people would be traveling to go see it necessarily. I think it would do decent sales. But I think if you just built it up just a little bit, I think that this would be a fight where I would potentially consider flying in. If the winner of like Navarrete versus Valdez fought Shakur, it would still be two undefeated fighters, two champions unifying to go at it. But, you know, I understand why people want to see the Valdez fight right now. My thing is, like, it's just funny to me how people really want to see this fight so badly. I mean, I've wanted to see all kinds of fights for a lot of years. Like, I'm still waiting on Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence still, right? And that's been like 4 years. And I understand that they're different promotional companies, you know, but I was waiting for, you know, before Canelo decided to go and clean out the division, I was waiting for, you know, Plant versus Benavidez. I was waiting for Callum Smith versus Billy Joe Saunders. There's a lot of fights we don't just to go get to see. You know what I mean? So I just think that for us to expect that this fight's just going to happen just because it's in house, like, I mean, who knows? You know what I mean? But I understand that Shakur's fans are very excited about him. I'm very excited about him too. Like, I like Shakur Stevenson. If he was unable to get the Valdez fight and he just stayed at 130 just for a little bit, I'd be okay with him moving up to 135. We've seen historically when all-time greats, kind of like perhaps like De La Hoya, just kind of cruise through a division. Like, I don't necessarily need to see him stay at 130 and clean everything out and fight a bunch of people just to get all the belts and to continue to pay those commission fees. Like, if he wants to just move up, I'd be okay with that too. I don't necessarily need to see the Valdez fight to know who I think would win it. And I don't think he's necessarily in a bad spot at all. I think Shakur is still quite young. It's nice to see what a young 24-year-old can actually accomplish. Like like you were saying earlier, Gringo, about Berlanga being 24 and not getting much done. Like, you could see like how far he's gotten at a very young age. 24, he's a two division world champion. The skills are already there. He's continuing to grow and he's upping his level of competition and he's calling out everybody. So I really like what I see from Shakur Stevenson.
Yeah, absolutely. Just again, something I wanted to add, like, you know, y'all made great points. Just think how awesome. I guess Shakur would be, you know, the main event. But if you had all four of the guys that I mentioned on the same card, which they're all top rank, you know, maybe, you know, and if it's not a pay-per-view, I would lose my mind. You know, that would be an unbelievable card, you know, just with that itself, you know, and especially with the young, stable talent that they have. If you have Shakur Stevenson versus, you know, Robeisy Ramirez, which again, you know, they could build that story as far as the Olympic, which people may not care about. But again, they have Robeisy Ramirez on the top ranked stable for a reason. And I think it's to face Shakur at some point. I mean, that's just my opinion. Even though I know he lost his debut, they have him there and they're kind of marinating a fight potentially for the future and have that opponent. That's how highly they think of Shakur. And then if you had the co-main event being Navarrete versus Oscar Valdez, I mean, you talk about like fire. That would be unbelievable. And it's realistic to me. And you could have that fight anywhere, I think, and it would do phenomenal. Somewhere on the West Coast, you know, Arizona, Texas, you name it. You know, Speaking of which, real quick, shout out to Top Rank for having no love for the East Coast, man. These cars are getting later and later, man. What the hell?
7:30 start time.
Brutal, dude.
Killing us.
I think a good idea too, if they don't want to, if Top Rank, maybe, I don't know what their model is, but if they could have it on, if they have a split site like they used to do split sites, but they have Valdez fight somewhere and Shakur fight somewhere on the same day, that would be pretty good. And then they could have both of them doing post fights, and then both of them are going, they're not going to be in the same room, but after both their fights, whoever, I mean, they'll have like a little banter back and forth at the end. That'd be a good one if they did a split side ESPN. I think that'd be great. Like one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, or in Texas.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the whole thing. Just us as fans, if we knew who was next, not hope who's next, not pray who's next, not think who's next. If we knew who was next, the sport would grow exponentially. I mean, the talent is definitely there. They have a lot of talent. They're just not fighting each other. And then we're not clear on what the actual path of these fighters, and that's where the frustration lies for me, at least.
I mean, that's a great point, dude. Like, you know, I've told the story before. Like, I don't know if you host fight parties yourself, Gringo, but over the years, you know, I would take my friends and bring them to see certain fighters, and then when those two fighters would collide, I would bring them over and start up a new boxing fans. You know, but when they kind of go off on their own, bro, like all of a sudden they're kind of seeing inactive fighters, or these fighters aren't fighting the fights that we want to see anymore, and then they just fade away and become a casual again. I've seen it happen, dude. You know what I mean? So you're right. It would be nice if they could just build up some of these fights and let us know what to expect, because when you see the clashes happen, man, like that's when you get that feeling of, oh man, it's fight night. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, I would host fight parties. That was like my guilty pleasure still to this day. Well, pandemic aside, but one thing that I'll say where I would actually look at fights and be like, okay, well, I see that Gilman Rigondeaux is going to fight. That's not a fight party fight. When I saw that Rios versus Alvarez was fighting, that's a fight party fight. And honestly, you would bring the casuals in. And I'll say it real quick. I don't want to get off side because obviously this is your show, which I got great respect for. A guilty pleasure of mine. I know people think he's got no skills and they hate him and he's a fraud or whatever. But a guilty pleasure of mine as a fighter was Triple G because he was the casual GOAT, man. Like my casual friends love this guy, man. So anytime I didn't even have to say who the opponent was. I said Triple G was fighting. They wanted to see it, and I love that. That made me like him, because it created that a casual magnet. He was just kind of the draw during that 2011 2019 period. So it is what it is. But yeah, I know all about the fight party, man. I'm all about that. So I would always pick and choose. And yeah, so when they have a path, it just makes it so much easier. And that's why I think the blueprint for the UFC is so successful. You know what's coming next, and they tell you, and it happens, and they've had great success. And we're just sitting on the sideline hoping for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And Triple G, even though I was a fan of Triple G up until it just started getting too much about the business and more of like when he cut Abel Sanchez. I didn't think that was cool. He gets a huge contract and then says you need to take a fixed rate opposed to the normal 10% he was getting. And I didn't think that was really cool for him to do. Marquez did it with Nacho, and I understand people do it. Cotto did it in the past, but at the same time, it's like this guy really built your name up, and he was like ride or die for you with the reporters and everything. And I don't know, but with regards to like the casual boxing fans and getting them, it's sort of like what both of you said is that you sort of need like a guide, it's like you're on vacation, you need a tour guide, and like it's so confusing. You're in a foreign country with boxing because there's so many belts, so many divisions, it's so fractured, but you need a guide being like us, the hardcore fan, to really like guide you when you're first getting into boxing, or else you have no idea what you're watching. You're like, this is for a belt. Like if you watch Jamal James fight, they're like, then how does Ugas have a belt? And it's like, is that Pacquiao's belt or Ugas's belt? And that's just really one division with one sanctioning body. So imagine like trying to consume all the different divisions. It would be too much.
Yeah, man, it's bad, dude. I'll tell you, like, I remember when I took some friends to go see, I actually was able to get 8 other people to come see the Wilder Fury fight and to discuss how, well, Wilder's the WBC champ, and I didn't even bother to tell these people that there were other belts, but Tyson Fury was the lineal champ. It's just kind of like, oof, it's kind of a pain in the ass. But in regards to Triple G, you're absolutely right. Like, he was a casual, like, fan favorite. I'll tell you, like, people actually knew who Triple G was. Like, that was one of the bigger fight parties, like, before that, I think, I remember Canelo Mayweather, people knowing both those fighters, but yeah, dude, Canelo, Triple G, and, the casuals came in and they liked Triple G. He was fan friendly. I'll tell you what, now people like come over. I'm like, hey man, Canelo's fighting. And they're like, oh, who's he fighting? I'm like, dude, like, the guy, what I mean? These people don't know who these dudes are. You know what I mean? They don't watch the sport that much. Like, and none of them really have that much of like crossover appeal. Canelo's pretty much going to be carrying this pay-per-view. There's just not that many new stars anymore, dude, unfortunately. And these guys don't fight often enough and don't fight that level of competition often enough to be able to build their own name. So it is kind of a shame that things have changed, and it's like, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but I'll tell you, like, the older I get, like, the more I have like perspective of what things were like in boxing, like in my 20s, as far as like the level of fights that we were getting, and the accomplishments of these fighters and at what age they were doing it, so that's like one of the reasons I really started to give Berlanga a hard time, because all of a sudden I was hearing like Berlanga being compared to Canelo. I'm like, well, besides maybe the fact that they're fighting in the same weight class right now, like, on what level could you possibly compare the two? It doesn't make any sense at all to compare the two. You know what I mean? And so, and we could just in real time track it. Like, we know what Canelo was doing at 22, 23, 24, right? By the end of 24, he at 22, he started with Trout, then he went Mayweather, then he went Angulo, and then he went Lara. It's like, well, if anybody did anything, I don't think Teofimo could even get a resume like that, even if he fought the best. Like, I mean, like Lomachenko, after Lomachenko, like there's not enough quality there to have 3 more consecutive fights that would rival what somebody like Canelo did. But he's on track to be, as successful as Canelo. But then you see somebody like Berlanga at 24 who hasn't really done anything yet. And it's like, well, why are we comparing the two? Are we really comparing the two? That's all I got to say.
No, that's a fair assessment too. And then for me, this is a fight fan. It's frustrating these fights aren't happening. And yeah, shout out to G Funky. Yeah, I did mention Triple G. My bad, guys. But like I said, hey, fight party, and that's when I think fight party, I think casuals, and Triple G comes to mind. Man, it is what it is. But Berlanga, the frustrating thing with him is, which that's I don't want to get too off track, is like he is getting this opportunity, he's getting this spotlight. I mean, he's got a great corner. I mean, he's got great support, all the way. If he had by the optics, if he had half the skill level and commitment that I see, I don't know what he's doing, in the ring and what he's working on, but as like a Xander Zayas, he'd be the star they're trying to tell us that he is. I mean, they're really pushing, Berlanga even more than Xander to me, So when people say that as far as like oversaturation of a certain fighter or this fighter's being put too much to the forefront, that's it's all relative. Because honestly, what I like to say is, put yourself a reality check. So just kind of go on the street and talk to a casual, ask them if they know who the hell any of these guys are. They don't know any of them. So it's more of like an internal strife with as far as the boxing fandom. Like, oh, they're showing this guy too much. No one's getting shown enough, to be honest. I mean, they all need to be shown 10 times more than they are. But for that to happen, there has to be interest. And for the interest, there has to be fights. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, great stuff, man. Well, hey, dude, let's switch to the next subject. Noteball, before we got on, man, you were telling us you got a line on Ramirez versus Bivol, or maybe this fight not happening or something, man. Tell us, dude, what's the word on the street, bro?
Well, they're saying that Bivol doesn't have no interest in fighting Zurdo Ramirez, and I guess Zurdos and Golden Boy are the ones pushing for that fight. And I wanted to ask everybody what they think about that situation,
Well, I don't have too much information on it, but I mean, I would love to see that fight. Off the top of my head, I don't know who I'd have to favor. Like, I'd have to think about it a little bit more, but I like both fighters, although I think Bivol, it's only a matter of time before he does get beat personally. Ramirez, I still need to think a little bit more about it. What do you think, Gringo?
It's a fight that on paper I think it'd be, definitely compelling, fun to watch. I know that Zurdo Ramirez is coming off of, 2 victories, and he's getting his name back out there. He's circulating and he's pushing it. He wants to fight, and this is what we're talking about. We want 2 talented fighters that would make a good matchup. To go ahead and get it on. But offline, Paul brought up a good point that I think we're dealing with kind of the remnants as far as Bivol. Because there was a period of time where Canelo was mentioning his name, once when the cash cow speaks, people listen, right? So they're thinking like, oh man, well, if I'm even in the consideration, even if I'm just thrown out there as a, as just smokescreen, I got to leave myself available, and I don't want to risk it for a big payday. What's going to be a bigger payday? It's a no-brainer. So I think there's a little bit of that, and I hope that's not the case. But as far as like the fight itself, it'd be compelling, it'd be exciting, and it's what we need. And I think that fight would definitely sell. I mean, to me, Zurdo Ramirez should have been a star a long time ago. I mean, just his story, everything about it. I mean, it's disappointing that he just kind of disappeared, but he's trying to make a comeback, and I think that'd be a great way to make a statement that he's here for real, and he's, wants to put on a show for the fight fans.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great fight. I mean, we talked about it offline. I mean, with the other big fight in the division possibly being for Bivol, meaning it would be against Artur Beterbiev, who's tied up with Marcus Brown. Then I don't see the reason that the fight can't be made between Bivol and Zurdo Ramirez, especially since that fight will most likely take place on the Zone. I think Bivol is tied into the Zone or ESPN, but I'm sure with any of the fights, that it could definitely be made. And especially since it's not like they're going to fight Joe Smith Jr., because I think they laid it out. Bob Arum laid out Joe Smith Jr.'s like 3-fight plan. I think that was at the beginning or middle of this year that they laid out. And I don't think any of those guys were in the mix outside of Artur Beterbiev, but that would happen sometime, I think, mid next year. So like we said before, these guys need to be active. And the only way you're going to gain popularity, which is what's going to bring you bigger purses, is going to be through getting in front of the public and then putting on great performances against good opposition. Because if you have consistent quality opposition and you perform very good against them on ESPN or on bigger platforms, that's the only way you're going to garner support. I don't think it's really going to be through like social media, especially with these guys, when you're not going to have a big social media following if like really when these guys are somewhat obscure fighters to the general public. So the only way you're gonna have to do it is through what your fists talk in the ring. And I think if you could build it up where you have Zurdo and Bivol fight, and then why don't you take the winner of Beterbiev and Brown, put them together, or mix in Joe Smith with them? Those are great fights. And then maybe the winner out of all those fights, if Canelo decides to come up, he fights one of them. So it just builds it up, and it's like that's how you're going to get better as well as a fighter, is by being in tough fights. Because you just don't want to fight Canelo and just cash out. You want to have a chance to beat Canelo. And the way you're going to do that is by fighting quality opposition. So I think it's a win-win for everyone at 175. And I think the winner, because Canelo might eventually move up. He's no way he's going to hold the weight, I think, even a little bit later in his career. So one of them is going to get him, whoever stands out of all like 5 of these guys in the mix.
That's a great point, Run PMC. One thing I want to add real quick as far as Judo Ramirez and, getting his name out there and taking advantage of, his marketability. Team Canelo had actually reached out to Judo Ramirez for the card he was doing in Texas, because they were in Texas anyway for the Liam Smith fight. And they were doing a card on the Friday. It was El Tigre Lopez versus Judo Ramirez in Houston or Galveston. And, they could have easily like switched it over because it was on that Friday. And then that Saturday was the Canelo Smith fight. And Judo Ramirez turned it down for whatever reason. So, I know there's been some questions in the past as far as some of his decision-making and the people in his team. Hopefully he learned from that. I mean, because he was kind of doing his own thing. But if we notice quickly after that fight, it didn't turn out, I guess, the way he wanted it. It was on Fight TV. He went to Golden Boy. And, even though Golden Boy's made some questionable moves, now he's seeing he's calling out Bivol. So hopefully he can get it together. And, it's a fight that needs to happen.
Nice, man. And hey, while we have a little bit of a gap, I'd love to acknowledge the people in the chat. Dude, sorry I haven't had a chance to call everybody out by name, but we appreciate you being here. We got the original Mr. Pigeon in the house, G Funky Boxing in the building. And then we also got Shoeshine Boxing. And it's good to see him always. And yes, we're not scared to mention Triple G, man. No, Paul, I think we got some feedback, brother. And Mad Dog H is here. Thank you. D Styles here. Thank you so much. And so it's great hearing what you all have to say, man. There is a lot of great potential fights come up. And I have to say, like, even though, like I said, I'm slowly becoming a bitter old man, like, it's still nice to have this level of quality as far as fights being made is concerned. Because the post like COVID pandemic era, like, there was like a year of bad fights. You know what I mean? So this is better, so I am enjoying analyzing potential matchups and like what's going on, like with particular divisions, so things are slowly being cleaned up, and I am grateful for it.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Chicano Prophet, something I wanted to say too, and this is not me trying to get kicked off the show or have people hate your show forever, but since we're mentioning Triple G, I'm not the only person that mentioned Triple G. Somebody actually mentioned Triple G in terms of Canelo and Caleb Plant. It wasn't me either.
Oh, hey, no, for sure, man. And you know what? Over here, we keep it out Chile, man. And, G Funky, he's just busting our chops. Like, you don't know the history here, gringo. You know what I mean? Like, listen, you know what I mean? Like, okay, here's the thing. Nopal and I had to be the open Canelo fans before it was like the cool thing to do. We were too old, but we started the Canelo cartel, even though it was dorky and we were too old for it. We had to do it. You know what I mean? We had to keep people in line. We had to let people realize that Canelo was getting unfair treatment. And on top of that, there shouldn't be anything wrong with Mexicans rooting for the torchbearer of Mexican boxing, who's doing the most, who has the best resume in boxing, is extremely accomplished. Like, to me, it just didn't make sense, so now it's okay. But now I've gone too far with this thing. Like, I knew I took it too far as soon as I had Canelo painted as an Aztec warrior, so I got to find a way to like scale it back somehow. You know what I mean? Because I was trying to make a point, but now I look like just some crazy dude.
No, hey, it's going all in, man. Put all your chips in there. That's the beauty of being a passionate fan. But what I want to say, as far as I love perspective, and that's why I appreciate this show so much. What about the comics that recently came out, and you guys can see it on Fight Hub TV? It's this little 40-second clip where Terrence Crawford was making a recommendation as far as strategy for Caleb Plant to beat Canelo, and the example he gave was, wait for it, Triple G. So, and he said the first fight specifically. There's so many layers to that. I would love to hear you guys' perspective on, is he just blowing smoke, or, and he didn't say specifically what that meant either, which is weird. Not that Caleb Plant has anything in his arsenal similar to Triple G as far as chin or power, but whatever. I mean, it's Terrence Crawford. So, what do you guys think about that comment? If you heard the comment, is there anything to it?
Let me go.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Let me. I think that it wasn't a well thought through comment from Terrence Crawford's part, because I don't think that Caleb Plant has the ability to do that. He'll probably get knocked out in the first or second round with that type of Triple G strategy. Only Triple G knows how to do that. I mean, he was excellent at reading the distance and just staying just far enough so Canelo couldn't quite reach him, So I don't think that Caleb, like I said, I don't think that Caleb Plant has the ability to do that. And I think that that must have been just a throwaway question for Crawford. I guess he's there to talk about his fight, and they're asking him all this irritated stuff that he doesn't even want to talk about. I mean, he wants to talk about his fight, and like I said, as far as Triple G, I wanted to kind of chime in a little bit. I mean, he is the best guy on Canelo's resume without a doubt, and those fights were pretty close, both of them, and I think that he doesn't get a lot of respect from people because he was old when he started doing the good fights, taking those big risks. He was already kind of old, and people lost a lot of respect for him because he didn't fight Andre Ward, when given the chance. That probably would have been win, lose, or draw. That would have been probably the biggest legacy fight in his career. And but I mean, truth be told, he was a great fighter. He was better than a lot of the guys right now that are, that Canelo's fighting. And too bad for him. I mean, he started his pro career real late. He was like 24, 25. And, he had a lot of problems. People were trying to use him up in Europe. And, once he got to the U.S., he found Abel Sanchez, and Abel Sanchez did the best he could with him. I mean, I don't think there's much that Abel taught him. I think he just tried to teach him to focus more on the body shot so he could kind of imitate Cesar Chavez a little bit of the Mexican style. But in reality, I don't think he had the Mexican style. And me personally, the reason why I used to talk really bad about Triple G is because I saw how the media used him as kind of like a sweetheart to make, villainize Canelo a little bit, and I kind of got a bad feeling from his fans because they were rabid back in the day. They were freaking pushy as hell. They were trying to say that everybody's ducking them, stuff like that. And,
right.
With the Canelo thing, I think they blew it out of proportion when Canelo vacated that fight. A lot of people didn't really pay attention that the reason why that fight wasn't made early on was more of because I think the WBC kind of try to put a purse split that wasn't really necessarily fair for Canelo, a guy that was already a pay-per-view star, to try to pay Triple G, who was a silver belt holder at that time, which basically gave him like a mandatory split of like 40% or something like that, which was probably, I think that wasn't fair for Canelo, because he's the guy building up his pay-per-view resume, and here comes Triple G, who's never made more than 1 or 2 million. Right. And now you got to share 40% of all the proceeds to this guy. I believe they try to negotiate that fight to something a little more fair, and these guys were holding pretty tight. They wanted to take it to purse bid, and so they just decided to vacate that. But the truth is that fight didn't take too long to negotiate anyways. They later on all agreed to keep it at a 75-25 split, which was very good for Triple G. You know, even a 25% split, that was already very good, because originally these guys had said, hey, if we fight right now, we're only giving Triple G 10%, you know, which I think that was kind of ridiculous. But I think that, you know, they got a fair split, not to mention the second fight, they took home almost 50% of the purse. And, you know, me personally, like I said, I kind of got into it with a lot of Triple G fans. So there was a lot of bad blood. Some of it was racial, and, you know, it took its toll a little bit. But as far as him, bro, we got to respect him, because he was an awesome fighter, and he did bring some very exciting fights. And he was a casual's dream, man. Everybody knew who Triple G was, and he was great. And I thank you, Gringo, for bringing that up.
Thank you, man. Like, Casual Dream, that should be Triple G's nickname. That's what he was.
You know, yeah, I really don't know what Terrence Crawford was thinking when he said that. Like, you know, it might just be like some twisted, sick joke. Like the original Mr. Pigeon tells us here, Plant needs to bite down on his gum shield and do a Hearns Hagler. Like, see, I mean, that would be great, but I mean, that would just be like a way of Plant getting his ass kicked faster. You know, like I don't really know what Terrence Crawford meant. Like, to me, it's like, okay, well, there was a lot of mutual respect between Canelo and Triple G in that first fight. I mean, there's no mutual respect here. Like, there's a lot of disrespect going on. On top of that, too, yes, Canelo's style was a little bit of, like, you know, maybe slight counter-punching back foot lateral movement, but he wasn't running or anything like that. But you could see that Triple G respected Canelo's power, and obviously vice versa. I don't think we're going to see Canelo respect Plant's power at all. And Triple G, on top of that, is a very good two-handed fighter. Caleb Plant's only got one hand that's worth a shit. So, like, I look at the dynamics, and it's just like I really don't see like how Plant could win. Like, should he go for broke? Yeah, but, you know, like, I agree with Pigeon here when he says that Plant runs for 9 rounds and then the KO happens. Like, that's what I think too, pretty much. I think it'll be up to Canelo, you know, but I mean, like I said, all you have to do is go back and watch the last few rounds of the Uskadagi fight to know how this fight's going to end. Like, you know, Caleb Plant has no hope. But I've been hearing a lot of people talk about, like, hey, you never know. Like, Plant's got all this stuff going for him. And hey, man, you know, I like competitive fights. Like, that's why I watch boxing. But, like, to me, I think the odds makers have this one right. Like, I think this is going to be an easier fight. Like I always said, as far as going undisputed goes, like, after Billy Joe Saunders, it was all downhill. So I think this is going to be a little bit of a showcase fight. I think that Plant might have a game plan, but he's going to realize that, like, there are levels to this. Like, this idea that, you know, well, hey, you know, I'm undefeated and I beat all these guys and they said I couldn't, but, you know, I'm going to prove you guys wrong once again, mark my words. I'm like, well, I mean, you know, I like the confidence, and I guess he should be speaking like that. But from the outside, it's like, who the hell does this guy think he is? You know, like, he's going to realize that his plan A is not going to work. His plan B is not going to work. And he's also going to see that the power is going to be coming at him. He's not going to like it. I can guarantee you that. So I'm looking forward to this fight. There's a lot of interesting dynamics, and I'm glad that we're actually talking about this fight because, hey, man, it's less than 2 weeks away. Like, it's nice that we're getting Canelo fights so frequently, you know, and this is for Undisputed. So it is time to start getting excited about it, I think.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely excited for it. I'm not excited for the undercard. Once again, it's underwhelming, but you know, it is what it is. I mean, when you pay the main event, you know, cash cow Canelo so much, and even not talking about people's purses, but even Caleb Plant's getting 10 million. You know, you're gonna have to cut your expenses somewhere, and that's where it is.
And we got 92 AKU in the house, the unofficial third member of the Canelo cartel. And he says he's going to be rooting for Plant as a Canelo fanboy. Well, good for you, man. Good for you, you know. And yeah, if Plant wins, I'll never predict again. Well, dude, I mean, you know what? You can bet the house on Canelo as far as I'm concerned. And he asks if we've seen the All Access episode 1. You know, I did see that 92 AKU, and you know, I thought it was actually pretty good. Like, I enjoyed seeing the production level of that. Like, I thought it was high quality. I thought it was a bit of a shame that they really couldn't talk about who Canelo beat recently and like what he was doing, other than the fact that he had most of the belts. Like, they really didn't show exactly what Canelo's been up to. They had to focus a little bit more on the Showtime footage or the Fox footage or whatever it was, like what Caleb Plant's been doing it, and they made it seem like he's just out here taking care of business. I thought it was interesting to see that the beef between Plant and Canelo started early during their little commercial that they were making before their press conference. So it was nice to get an inside look at that. Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting all around.
Showed Canelo golfing on a golf lesson too. Thought that was funny.
Yeah, man, he's doing his thing, dude. The other thing that I admire about like Canelo is just his discipline alone. Like, I'm very impressed that this guy's worth $250 million, and he's still out there performing at a very high level and managing everything pretty well. Like, it makes me feel like I'm lazy. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I'll go ahead and say that I have a great appreciation for this, run that he's having, by being so active, and that he is focused on, hitting these plateaus and these career benchmarks as far as becoming undisputed. I think it's going to be a little anticlimactic, like we're kind of all saying. I mean, if anything, to any, validity to what Terrence Crawford said. I mean, when I heard it, that's why I wanted to present it to you guys, because it was so outrageous to me. I just wanted to make sure that I was saying, like, was there something I missed and one of Caleb Plant to think that he had the, the ability or skills to do that?
I know.
Pull it off. I was like, maybe I missed one of his fights. Maybe he went in there and he, plowed through somebody using his power. But, no. So, yeah, I think that Nopal was right. I think it was kind of a question that was dismissed that got captured and where, got encapsulated into like, well, what the hell was I thinking? But it's out there now.
And Mad Dog H wants to know if Canelo would get robbed if it goes to the scorecards. I personally don't think so. Like, say Al Heyman had these judges in his pocket. Like, well, I think it would benefit him to kind of wait a little bit on that and use it more towards a fight where it could be close, potentially like I still think Canelo would whip Charlo's ass, but maybe like a Benavidez fight or something like that. Like, don't waste it on Caleb Plant. Caleb Plant's not going to be around for very long, and I don't think he could be the new moneymaker. You know what I mean? So it wouldn't make sense for any party, really.
No, it is a business, and I know that they wanted to bring Canelo over for a reason. They want to get multiple fight deal. I mean, I think they know what's coming their way for their man Caleb Plant. So I think that, yeah, that would not be a good business move. And even though they frustrate us with their lack of quality cards all the time, the PBC, shout out to them for that. But I don't see Al Heyman making that move. But it is boxing, and boxing is going to be boxing, so.
That's right. And now that we're on the topic of controversial decisions, man, it's time for us to do our rescore, where every week we choose a controversial fight from the past, rescore it, and give it to you al Chile. Was it the right call? Was it a robbery? Well, let's find out. We have Pernell Whitaker versus Julio Cesar Chavez, and we got Run PMC, who's going to let us know like what was going on at the time. Run PMC, please take it away.
Thank you very much. All right, so like Chicano Product said, we have Whitaker Chavez this week. He came to us September 10th, 1993 from San Antonio, Texas at the Alamo Dome, which, funny enough, Canelo and Trout fought there, which some view as a controversial decision. I didn't really see it as so, but this was the first defense of Whitaker's WBC welterweight belt that he won earlier that year from Buddy McGirt, which many people thought it was a lackluster performance by Whitaker, but he ended up avenging that later on down the line and really piecing up Buddy McGirt. But this was Chavez's run for a belt in his fourth weight class, starting at 130, now all the way up at 147. I didn't know this, but as doing research, I saw that this fight was actually at Chavez's request. It was contracted at a catch weight of 145. So that's interesting to see that even back then there were things going on that many people complain about nowadays, is that this was at 145 pounds. And then to put this into perspective, this for activity back then among the great fighters of the time, this was in Chavez for the year of 1993. This was Chavez's fourth out of 6 fights, and this was what Whitaker's second of his 2 fights in that year. But Whitaker in 12 months had 4 fights, and then Chavez in 12 months had 7 fights. So it's sort of interesting to see that nowadays guys are really have those 2 fights, but back then that it was very commonplace to have upwards of 4 to 7 fights in a 12-month period. At the Alamo Dome, there were 63,000 fans, and this was really dubbed by Ring Magazine, when it was more of a reputable source, that this was Chavez's number 1 pound for pound on their list. Whitaker was number 2 pound per pound, and this was really who was going to be. This was for pound for pound supremacy. So very, very interesting things, but there were definitely some, at least after the fight and going into the fight, there were some things I wanted to touch on. So as sometimes when you watch through like older boxing documentaries, they always make the delineation of when in the early 90s when Mike Tyson was incarcerated and what Don King's really tactics or maybe the things that were going on in boxing at the time. So this is 1993. So Mike Tyson wouldn't be released from prison for 2 more years. And then at this point, Mike Tyson's in prison, and then Don King has moved his stable all from HBO to over to Showtime, and then independent Don King, like King Vision type of pay-per-view cards. And it's interesting to see, because this is a controversial fight, that both of Chavez's this being a draw and then what went on in the Meldrick Taylor fight, they both occurred during when Mike Tyson was in prison. So some people might look at that as maybe Don King having a great relationship with the WBC and potentially having. Maybe they could look at the judges in the bag, maybe the referee Richard Steele in that case for the Taylor fight as have really being trying to give Chavez a early stoppage, but because they needed to keep Chavez as the cash cow for Don King. That's just my observation from looking at just sort of the context how it's set up. But that's just what I made of that. Also, we can talk about the official scorecards. They had 2 scorecards of 115, 115. Those were done by Mickey Van and Judge Franz. And then 1 scorecard of 115, 113 done by Jack Woodrow. And it should be noted that the 2 judges that had it 115, 115, which indicates there were some even rounds in there, some 10-10 rounds, that those were both judges that were sanctioned by the WBC or WBC judges. And then Jack Woodrow was just a judge from the United States. So just another thing to keep note of as we talk about this fight. So that's about it. The original broadcast was done by Showtime Boxing, so we would have heard it with Ferdy Pacheco, Dr. Ferdy Pacheco, and Bobby Chiz. But the one on YouTube that I rewatched was done, I think, was done in a more of a retrospective, and it was done with Al Bernstein and Barry Tompkins. So it was probably the international broadcast. So, how did you guys see it? And I'll get in my scorecard at the end.
All right, Gringo, man, let us know what you thought, man. Thank you so much for joining us for this portion too, man. I wanted to know your thoughts on this one. Let us know, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I love this segment of your show. Please don't ever stop doing it. And this is one of the best aspects of what you guys have in a great quality show. So yeah, I'm saying that so I don't get the hate mail on what I came on my score. To put that out there, put all the love out there first. So I watched it closely, and I did watch what Run PMC said. I watched the telecast with what it was, Bernstein, I believe. Yeah, the one on Showtime. So they were very critical of Chavez lack of combinations. So I really tried to, when I had to watch it 3 times because I want to make sure I didn't get swayed at all. I'm just looking at the action, and it seemed like they kept pointing out, "Oh, he missed again. Oh, he missed again." So when I went through the fight, I scored it 3 times. I scored it. The first time I scored it 9-3 Whitaker, and then I gave a swing round because I gave a swing round. Initially, I gave it to Whitaker, but then upon the 3rd review, I gave it to Chavez because he was actually landing when they were saying he was missing, and it was a close round. So I had it 8-4 Chavez for my final score upon my 3rd review. And the things that stood out to me is, even though Chavez wasn't doing his normal body work, the thing that stood out to me is I think this is a great example of how fighters can be, movement and speed differential can really and skill can really make a difference and even disrupt the great Chavez. I mean, the thing that stood out most aside from that too was the inside fighting of Whitaker, which I didn't expect at all. I mean, especially in the later half after the 6th round, like the 7th through the 12th round, I had Whitaker and he was just going with the movement to side, but he kept on giving different looks, but he wasn't scared to mix it up, and he was landing some good punches. There was an issue with the low blow, and I actually gave that one in the 6th round. I gave that to Chavez in that round. There was another complaint of Chavez of a low blow in the 10th round, but at that point, I think Whitaker to start pulling away, and Chavez just seemed kind of frustrated. He did have slight moments, but it just wasn't his night. So again, I gave him 8 rounds, Whitaker, 4 rounds, Chavez. But it was thoroughly entertaining. I mean, 2, legends at the peak of their power. So it was awesome.
Great, man. So let me ask you, Gringo, do you consider it a robbery?
No. Yeah, the reason why I don't I call it I'm not calling it a robbery because a robbery would be to me where I wouldn't have to watch it 3 times. You know, like the rounds were close. And as far as like the number of punches that were landed and thrown, now, granted, Whitaker did take control as far as he was clearly in control, but there was no knockdowns in there, which, there was no knockdowns that were done. It wasn't like Chavez was actually hurt. That's another thing, too. There was no like definitive, he was just being outboxed. I mean, Whitaker was boxing circles around him from, 7 through 12. But, it was close enough to where I could see somebody not say draw, but I could see a 7-5 maybe. But when you get to me, this is my opinion. Okay, this is my thought in boxing. When you get to the 8-4, 7-5, that's not a robbery to me. So I thought that it was close enough and in a close enough round. I mean, hell, I'm calling a round a swing round and I change it. There's no robbery there to me. Now it's always a robbery from the standpoint of the fighter. They put all that hard work and they don't get the decision. But I think, and hell, I'm in Texas. Maybe that's just how Texas see fights. But I don't see it as a robbery, as it was stated, like on the cover of Sports Illustrated, right there. Growing up, that's what I was told. That's I was told. But upon rewatching it for the third time, back to back, and without the volume, the second and third time, it was a 8-4 fight, and it was a respectable, close fight, and I didn't see enough. I didn't see any damage, knockdowns, or Chavez being hurt. I just saw him being outboxed. So it was a disappointment, but I wouldn't call it a robbery, not by my definition.
Very good. Thank you, man. So Run PMC, man, what did you think?
All right. I think we differ a little on this one because I had it 118, 110 Whitaker. I only watched it once. I just actually rewatched it before here just so it could be fresh in my mind. But I have rescored this before, and I think because that 118, 110, and then I had I'll say my close rounds. I had 1-12. I had it close, and I split those. I gave Whitaker the first. I gave Chavez the 12th, and then I gave Chavez the second. I could see the 6th round being a close round, so I could put that in there. But I really thought Whitaker did everything. If you go by because I went and go into this fight knowing that the narrative was that Whitaker got robbed, so I tried in my head to just think about when I was judging it, like I'm going to give Chavez like the benefit of the doubt on something, but when I was judging it, when I was rewatching, I'm just like, man, Whitaker is banging to the body. He's coming up top. He's running combinations. His jab was ridiculous. Coming from, he would be crouched down, shoot the jab up top. Not really many jabs to the body. He would lead. We would throw at times lead left uppercuts, just leading, whether it was to the body or to the head. And then even at times he would back Chavez into the ropes and just bully him on the ropes. I thought he controlled him by just physically controlled him. I was surprised how strong he was. And then even like he would do like little check hook spin off the ropes and then get Chavez in the corner. And I mean, I love Chavez, but I just didn't see this one how the judges saw it. Maybe if I watched it again, I would think differently. I watched it with the volume on just because I try to do that with every fight, just to hear the crowd and everything and see maybe how the judges maybe were swayed. But I don't know. That was basically how I thought of it. I thought going in it would be a little bit closer, but that's just how I saw it. I mean, I know I probably differ from you all, but that's just how I saw it for this one.
Interesting. So, Brian, would you say that in your mind it was a robbery?
Yes, I think so because I had it 10-2. But if I were to give Chavez and if it went into that 8-4 range, I am with Sean in saying that if you're in an 8-4 range, that's really only a 2 rounds difference of for it being a draw. But it depends how I think you get to that 8-4 range. If it's like an 8-4 where you give the benefit of the doubt to the fighter that has the 4, and you give them, that's how you made it to that point by already giving him the benefit of the doubt, then I think that's a wide win from the person that got 8. But if you got to the 8-4 by just scoring it with just not giving the benefit of the doubt to anyone, then I could see that being 6-6 the other way or 7-5 the other way if they're like genuinely close rounds. But for this one, I mean, I just didn't see it being close. So I think I would say I'd classify it as it should have been Whitaker's decision. Outside of knockdowns, I think this was a boxing lesson. I think he did everything he could. The only thing I think that he could have done better in the earlier rounds was maybe stay in front, not move as much. But then when he was doing that, he was still popping jabs and he still was punching as he was moving back. And he still was doing little things like that. And then when they would get exchanges, I did think that he did get the best of Chavez. But I do think, with regards to the commentary, that Chavez's body work was severely underrated in this fight. It was almost like they're ignoring it. Like, it reminded me of when Canelo's body work against Lara, and I think Lara won that fight, but it wasn't getting commented on early. But then I think it was at the end they would just slip things in, and I didn't agree with the scoring of Al Bernstein as well. Like in the first 2 rounds, I had it where the first round went to Whitaker in a close round, the second round went to Chavez. I didn't think that was a close round, but then he gave the second one to Whitaker. But during his commentary throughout the round, he was acting like Chavez was winning the round, and same with Whitaker in the first round. He was acting like he was acting like Chav. He was acting like Chavez win the round, but then gave it to Whitaker. Or I might have spoke wrong on that, but it was just sort of his scorecard wasn't always matching what he was saying. So that doesn't have to do with the fight, but it was just sort of how the commentary was being said. So I don't know, but
that's a great point. So I just want to add real quick, to add on to what Run PMC was saying. That's another thing too that we got to keep in mind. Like from what I saw, that's why I turned the volume off. They knew the results, so they were clearly they had narrative in their mind.
Yes,
and they're recalling it. So that's why I was like, man. And they were basically like giving their opinion based off the results of it being a robbery. And I do think that impacted, because another thing they didn't give credit for, not just the body work, but even though they were saying he wasn't doing it as far as with the follow-up with the hook, but Chavez had a really good straight left that he was landing pretty good, and it's like they weren't even acknowledging it at all. So that's just, my 2 cents.
Exactly. And that's why in the intro to this, I wanted to say this wasn't the original broadcast. This was a retrospective that was done through ESPN, because the original cast would have been Freddie Pacheco, Bobby Chiz, and then I don't know who was doing the unofficial scoring for them at the time, but this wasn't. So that's why, for people to rewatch it, very important. This was done probably a week later, like they used to do when like Showtime and them do. They have the recast of it.
Oh yeah,
great stuff, man. Well, I'd like to go next because I wanna let No Paul sweat a little bit. You know what I mean? So, I saw this. Yeah, I saw this fight kind of like how Sean saw it. When he gives his first take on how he watched it. I had it 9-3, Whitaker beating Chavez in a pretty well. I mean, it was a pretty wide, but and also I think a clear decision for Whitaker, in my opinion. Like, I did have some swing rounds. Some of the early rounds I found to be swing rounds. But I think even if I gave every swing round to Chavez, he would only be up. He'd only have 5 rounds, actually. So he'd still lose. And I did think there was some interesting aspects when watching this fight. Like, this is the first time I watched the whole thing through in the last 10 years. Like, I tried rescoring it just out of sheer curiosity, maybe 3-4 years ago, but I got a little bored with it, and there was something else going on. And so it was a little too saturated for me, and I was just like, well, okay, I'm watching too much boxing. Like, I need to just get off it. But this time I sat down, I watched it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. After recently watching Sweet Pea fight De La Hoya and a couple of other of his fights, like, I've grown to really appreciate his skill set in general. And then also I've gone back and watched Chavez fights since then, and I've asked D-Style, like, okay, well, what were his biggest wins at the time? And I went back and I think Chavez was obviously an excellent fighter, but I felt like he had a kind of a style that he would bring all the time. Like, he would go and bang it out with attrition, and then his chin would hold up and the other guy would crumble. And I see that pattern a lot, except for when it doesn't work. And I don't think it worked with Whitaker. Whitaker was also very good on the inside, but he chose his spots. Like, he's very good at moving, and then when he stops, he's very good at, like, showing Chavez a quick look and then changing the pace really quickly so that Chavez doesn't get used to something or can counter back. So, I felt like there was a lot of control that Whitaker was showing as far as the ring generalship, but I also didn't necessarily like the way he kept moving. He'd always just keep moving on his back foot. And then when Chavez would stop, Whitaker would take advantage right away and show that he was in command. Like, he was able to kind of understand the ebbs and flows of Chavez's activity rate and make it seem like he was on the front foot or the one being aggressive when Chavez was kind of letting off the gas just a little bit because he couldn't continue to chase down Whitaker. And I also think that perhaps Whitaker was a little bit stronger on the inside, but like I said, he's not really scared of banging out, but he'd rather not, and he could just go on the back foot. So I thought that was very interesting as well. I thought that Whitaker was starting to pull away in the later rounds. I did score the last round for Chavez, which I scored as a swing round. But, I also kind of gave it to Chavez because I felt like it. Purnell's style, as a lover of the sweet science, it's great, but I mean, I could also see it being a little boring for some people. We're there to see a fight. And I mean, sometimes you want to, really enjoy an actual fight. Not that this wasn't, but, to me, it's like I said, when you're watching Sweet Pea, it's like you're watching the Harlem Globetrotters. You can ooh and ah, but sometimes, you want to see the chingazos, and he didn't always give that to the fans. Like, the fans really didn't seem too up for it. Like, I also watched the Al Bernstein commentary, and I found myself agreeing with a lot of what they were saying, even though they didn't actually call it. And like they all said, like, they had to go back and call it like they were watching it for the first time. But I found myself agreeing with a lot of their comments. So I thought it was an interesting fight to watch. I continue to respect Sweet Pea's skills. I would classify this one as a robbery. But, and on top of that too, like I said, I'm old school in the sense where, hey, I tend to favor the defending champion. If it's truly a swing round, like, I don't know why you would give Chavez the benefit of the doubt in a razor tight one, unless it's because he's maybe the up and coming cash cow, so that's a whole other aspect. But like the way I score fights, you got to take it from the champ. If it's razor thin, I'm going to give the champ the benefit of the doubt. I'm not going to go against him. So yeah, I had it 9-3, and I do classify this one as a robbery, having watched it one time all the way through. So no, Paul, what do you think, man? I've talked offline about this one. You know what I'm saying? So I'd love to know what your thoughts are, man. And if help make a case. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I hate to burst you guys' bubbles, man, but I scored it a draw. And I actually gave I guess most of us probably gave Chavez round 1 and 12. That's what I'm hearing from this. And yes, they were both also swing rounds. I believe everybody agrees on that, maybe.
Yeah.
I also gave Chavez round 2.
Yep.
Somehow I managed to give him rounds 4 and 5 and 6, but round 5 was a swing round, of course. And then also, and then from there, it was all Whitaker from round 7 to. Well, actually, I gave Whitaker rounds 3, and then from round 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 until the 12th round. So I scored it a draw. Of course, I am a little biased for Chavez, and I believe he wasn't ready for that style. I don't know how. He must have been watching Whitaker fighting the whole time. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure it was a fight that he eventually wanted to have, and I don't know how. That's what I want to say about Mexican fighters is, they I don't know if they don't teach them this sort of stuff, clinching and all that, because when they were in the clinches, Purnell managed to angle Chavez out to his good side and just bang on him, and Chavez didn't have no answers for that. Of course, Purnell was using all his gifts to do what he does best, and Chavez was kind of having trouble cutting off the ring, and I saw Chavez kind of go on the back foot for very briefly. And I kind of wanted to see a little more of that, a little more of that, which Chavez wasn't known for that. But I think that, these fighters got to broaden their horizons a lot more, man. And, learn to deal with these tactics that other fighters use, And I believe, to be honest, I think that Whitaker was the ring general because he was dictating everything basically, but I still managed to make it a draw, and I had a chance to see that that app that I have, and most people give most rounds to Whitaker, so there's a general consensus that it was a robbery, and I think that that people were like, damn it, that it's a robbery more or less because kind of like everybody's saying that it is, especially when we watch this fight, Al Bernstein and these guys, they barely gave Chavez any kind of rounds. And the whole fight, they're just pointing out everything that Chavez is doing wrong and highlighting everything that Purnell is doing right. But if you go back to the times when this fight was going on, most people were kind of mad at the way that Purnell was fighting. So, and I want to also point out that these judges, they don't have a chance to watch these fights once or twice or 3 times, before they make the decision. They got to make it then and there. So, we do know that there's corruption in boxing, but at the same time, there's that, a lot of these fights, we personally watching them and we're like, man, I'm going to need to watch this a couple more times, to make a adequate decision. But the judges don't got that. They don't have that ability to do that. So that's what I wanted to say about that.
That's true. And I want to say something that I think it's important to know that, like, I think that's why we try to give context to these fights, that at the time, I think boxing judging sort of evolves, even though the scoring criteria doesn't evolve. It's for the era they might have. You have the top fighters, and those might be looked at as the standard. So maybe those fighters are the ones that are influencing their style. Like, not saying they influence directly, but their style is what the judges might favor in a certain time. Like, I think now more than ever, boxers, maybe post Pretty Boy Floyd era, I think boxers might be favored in scoring, and body punching is neglected in scoring, because you don't see a lot of great body punchers nowadays. So maybe that might be neglected in scoring. Well, body punching was very big throughout the history of boxing, but you don't see a lot of guys dig down to the body, and if they do, they lack defense, where back then they could dig down to the body and also have great defense. So, like, even when you see Chavez, he digs at the body, but he is in my opinion, one of the best boxers who has the best vision in boxing, at least recent boxing memory, relatively recent, that he could be on the inside digging, but his eyes are always open, where you see some guys are just throwing punches. It's like, no way they're just sort of like pattern fighters. No way they actually have vision of their opponent when they're throwing. But I think that's important to think about, that even though the four criteria haven't changed, I think maybe what judges in their mind, what they look for, might change from time to time through eras.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I love what you said right there, and also Paul made a real interesting, insightful point as well too. That these judges are, I mean, some are being bribed, I get it, but they are human. So, like, just
Yep.
stylistically, they may not appreciate what Sweet Pea was doing. They may see it as running, even though you're saying, hey, they're judges, but if they're trying to, they may see it as they're trying. He's doing maybe too much movement and not engaging enough to really control the fight. Even though I appreciate what he was doing, I could see how someone would take it differently. And that's great, because that is a perspective that was out there, that he didn't engage enough. And, so that was another narrative that was out there too, for sure.
Yep. Yeah, and I think when you think about, like, boxing subjective scoring, it's not like football where if you pass the goal line, it's a touchdown. If you kick it through the uprights, it's a field goal. But I think, like, it's more similar to, like, when you have pitchers in baseball, like, they might be, maybe not with the new how they show on TV, they have the strike zone there, but in the past they could be throwing like a few inches off the plate consistently. But then by the third inning, they're now calling that a strike. So it's sort of like and then that's from the umpire. So it's sort of like what they favor, but it's like they have consistent command. Whereas, like, sometimes in boxing, it's like you might not be winning the round, but if you appear to be controlling the round to the judges, you're winning, actually. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and I've always said that, if you watch historic fights, sometimes when they go over the four parameters, they will say, but they do tend to favor the aggressor. I think that the sport does benefit when you have the fan-friendly fighter win, and when you talk about scoring, like, I do think that a person can win on the back foot, like I scored it here, but, I always score body punches. Also, I take into consideration the amount of time that a fighter is out of the pocket. I think if somebody's doing lateral and back foot movement, that's fine. But if you're actively not engaging and trying to get out of the pocket, well, then, I start scoring some seconds towards the other fighter winning, because that's controlling the ring. You know what I mean? So it's like, there's a lot of different aspects that I consider, and I had to use a lot of them towards, how I've evolved my scoring towards scoring this particular fight. But I still had it for Pernell. But I mean, it was kind of a lesson, probably. It's like, I understand the whole concept of, like, hey, we'll just get the win. That that forgives everything. But we are here to be entertained, and like I said, as a fan of the sweet science, I can enjoy that, but the crowd wasn't really that into that fight, and I could see somebody having a house party going, "Oh my God, this is a super fight," and it was called The Fight. Like, I could see some people seeing it as a little bit of a snooze fest.
I mean, that's fair, absolutely. Especially, like we said, there's a difference, and there's a reason why at fight parties you want the aggressor, you want the knockout, artists, you want the guys that are going to engage. The sweet science here, a casual's not going to appreciate that. Not even all boxing fans appreciate that. So, especially there at that audience with the people that are, for the majority, were there for Chavez, and the judges, they're human, not being an apologist for them, but if they're looking for something as well.
Totally. And, with you saying that, Sean, like, I got to say, like, part of me thinks that Floyd Mayweather going heel and becoming Money Mayweather, I think was good for his style, because, it would allow fight parties to happen because, people wanted to see Floyd Mayweather get his ass kicked. Right. So, I mean, that kind of added an aspect. It's like, oh man, can this dude get to him? You know what I mean? So it kind of made those fights a little bit more entertaining in that aspect.
Absolutely. And I think you're right on pardon the pun, money with that one. I think that him turning heel, his style, and the fighters that he would fight that would look to engage him, and he was more the counter, more the movement guy. It fit right into his, persona that he created. Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, does anybody else have anything to add before we start discussing what we're going to score next?
Only thing I have to add is that it's crazy. Like, I think at the time, I think this happens in all sports. I'm actually rewatching The Last Dance, the documentary on the '97 Bulls and sort of the retrospect on Jordan's career. And it's like, I think at the time, some people might get underappreciated while their career is here, and then they're gone. And you look back, and then it's too late to show. And then you look back at these old fights, and it's like, wow, these guys were really good. And when I think about that, I really think about like even some of the modern days fighters we have. If you think about like we like I was a Tim Bradley fan because he was a hard worker, but like I don't think he was really appreciated. But then if you're like, man, I wish I had some Tim Bradley, Ruslan Provatnikov, Tim Bradley, Juan Manuel Marquez, or even like some of Bradley's other fights, because it was like those were good fights. And then I think we could have the same thing right now. We could have great fights, but they just need to happen, So I think it's the main thing is that's why we need to appreciate when we see greatness, and we need to appreciate the great fighters of our time. If not, we'll always be looking to the past, or we might be hoping for these up and comers for the future.
Excellent, man. All right, dude. Well, Run PMC, thanks again so much for setting the stage, man. That was great, dude. So let's discuss what we're going to do next. Do you have any ideas? I know I got one. I'm not sure if you want to humor me. Can I tell you what I think?
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't mind making next week, a Canelo block party extravaganza. It's fight week, baby, kind of thing. So I was thinking, some people try to claim that Trout won the Canelo fight, and I think it'd be like a nice gimme to go back, rescore that one. Also, we're seeing what a lot of 22, 23, 24-year-olds are doing. So it might be interesting to go back and see what a young Canelo was capable of. You know what I mean? So that's something I had in mind. But, I know you're chomping at the bit to do the Bradley Provatnikov fight. So let me know what you think, unless, we're all in agreement that Canelo did win that fight. And if we are, then we don't necessarily have to go back and do that.
I think that's I'm down to do the Canelo Trout. I mean, I like to hear what everyone else has to say, but I'm down to do Canelo Trout or another Canelo fight, because especially fight week, it's very, very topical. And then we could talk about that, because some people feel that Trout won. I think the knockdown and maybe another round were the difference in that fight. But also that fight was over 8 years ago, and I haven't rewatched. I maybe rewatched that fight once, because I just outside from being live, so not live in person, but live like on TV. So I mean, if anyone else has anything to say, because the only other fight that I think Canelo would be close would be Canelo Lara, but I think we're saving that for a special episode with G Funk. So I think we could save that one. But is anyone else, Sean or no, Paul? Do you have any other ideas?
As a fan of your show and the way you break things down, I love it. So being Canelo week, I think that Canelo Trout would be awesome. But if you guys are feeling froggy, go ahead and do Bradley Provatnikov too. That'd be it's like a 3-hour show, man. I'll take work off. It doesn't matter. I don't need a job. I love it.
All right. Well, I'll let you guys humor me then. And then, so we're going to do it. We're going to do Canelo Alvarez versus Austin Trout, right? A very young Canelo. Let's see his skill set at that age and what he's accomplishing at that age. And then, like I said, we can compare it to what the new generation is doing. Plus, G Funky, he's on record. I don't know what the guy says. Sometimes he has Canelo winning. Sometimes he has Trout winning. Sometimes he has a draw, even though I think that's impossible when there's 110-8 round. Who knows with G Funky? You know what I'm saying? But I would love to get his official scorecard on that one. And D-Style likes to chime in here and tells us that for this particular fight that we just scored, he had an 8-4 Whitaker. So pretty close to what I had it and Gringo had it. So yeah, that was fun. Thank you guys so much. And then Sean, please feel free to come on and join us next week. If you want to, chime in, man, you're always welcome here. We had a great time having you here. Any final thoughts, anybody, before we take off?
I just want to say thank you guys again for having me on. It was an honor. I appreciate it. And shout out to Listo Gatan here in Texas. The young man is doing his thing. Light heavyweight prospect, making his name. So he's going to have some big news coming out soon. So we got your back, Listo, man, doing your thing. And can't wait to see you back in the ring. And Yeah, just thank you guys so much for having me, man. Enjoy the fights this weekend. I can't wait.
Yep. Yeah, I just want to add, yeah, thanks, Sean, for coming on, and man, I love your guys' channel and all your guys' shows, the lineup of shows you guys have, the recap show, and then the other shows. I really do enjoy. Long Live Boxing is a great channel and a great different perspectives on that. But for the upcoming week, I just want to highlight the two cards that we have. That the main cards we have Jose Cepeda versus Josue Vargas on ESPN. These are both going to be on Saturday, the 30th of October. And then we have Jamal James versus an opponent I've never heard of, Radzab Butayev. And then Jerome Busenis makes his return versus Thomas Delorme. That's also going to be on this Saturday, the 30th. That's going to be on Showtime, though.
Excellent stuff. Nopal, you got any final thoughts before we take off, man?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Gringo for coming on with us. Hopefully we get him on next week again. And I wanted to tell our audience to bear with us. We're having trouble reading all the comments right now. We'll figure it out. And, thank you guys.
Yeah, man, we appreciate everybody tuning in. Yeah, we're still trying to learn the ropes, you know what I mean? And then G Funky says, I'm not sure if he says did one on these shows. If you want on the show next week to discuss the Trout one, you're welcome, G Funk. I mean, you've had me on enough times, you know what I mean? And you're the man, but I don't want somebody being all salty on Canelo Fight Week. I want some hype, I want some enjoyment. I don't want to hear about how you just had it scored for Lara, for Triple G. I just want to talk about the Trout fight, and I want to enjoy the fact that Canelo is establishing himself as the greatest fighter of this generation, and it's not even close, all right? And yeah, dude, long live boxing, man. We all appreciate him. And it's like D-Style says, he's HCP family, whether he likes it or not, dude. We like them. We like the vibe. We like what they're doing over there. Good energy over there on that show, man. So thank you all so much. So for Nopal, Run PMC, and Gringo, we are out. Thank you guys for tuning in. Peace.
See you.